So is China taking over the world? Is it going to replace the US dollar as the world's reserve currency? Is China the next big superpower? Let's find out. Well, the bottom line of this video, as always, is going to come first. And today, it's going to be quite simple. Despite talking the big talk, China is not a global superpower, at least not yet. In fact, the next 10 to 15 years are going to be a major pain in the ass for China. It's going to struggle with massive economic issues, demographic, political, and energy trouble. Beyond that, the dollar is going to remain as the world's top reserve currency, and it will not be replaced by the yuan, not now, not in the foreseeable future, and probably not ever, for reasons which I'm about to explain in just a second. So first of all, let's answer a simple question. Is China actually a global superpower right now? Can it become one in the future? Well, the truth is that the United States is not what it used to be. Let's be honest. We can all see and feel it. A series of stupid mistakes, horrible decisions, and political blunders have caused the US to decline. And since it's no longer the same undisputed superpower it was 40 years ago, it left a significant vacuum, and a lot of other players are trying to go for their neck. This is how the world works, and if you listen to people like Ray Dalio, you're going to hear that China is about to fill that void and dethrone the US. But here's the problem. There's a huge difference between a desire and ability. For example, I really want to be an NBA player, but I don't have a chance since I lack the required skills. It's simple. So the question is, I guess, does China have the required skills and attributes to dominate the global stage instead of the US? Now, first of all, let's be fair. China has a huge industrial base. Some of it were created, by the way. It has a massive population, strong military force, all facts. Also, it has global influence in the UN Security Council. Also, they're pretty much buying up Africa clout. Also, it has an impressive economic growth over the past couple decades. It's just insane. They had a $200 billion economy in the 80s. Right now, they're right up there with the US with $20 trillion in just 40 years. You can't ignore that. However, I think crowning China as the world's next superpower is a bit premature, given what I'm about to show you right now in this video. So, for a country to become a true global superpower, it needs to dominate the world like MJ dominated the NBA. It needs a stable political system, a rule of law, the most technologically advanced economy, a strong military, the ability to provide for weaker countries and have clout and influence, having the most desired culture, standard of living. It needs to be the baddest, strongest, and richest and smartest player in the game. Now, throughout modern history, nobody even came close to the US, including the USSR, by the way, who could have competed for global military and political clout, but never came close to the economy. The USSR had the economy of a chicken farm in Nebraska and a standard of living that nobody in the world wanted. Trust me, I lived it. So now, let's put China through the same test. Does China check all of these boxes, or even just a few? So as far as the Chinese economy goes, look, from the first glance, you look at China, you look at this number, $20 trillion GDP, it looks phenomenal. It's literally up there with the US with its $21 trillion. It's basically the same. However, when you pop the hood, you're going to find out some issues you haven't seen in the first glance. Things become a little bit more problematic. So in the US, if you divide the GDP by the amount of people, you're at $65,000 per capita, which is, I think, the 6th or the 7th best figure in the world. China is ranked 59th with about $14,000 per human being. Now, you cannot be ranked 59th in GDP per capita and claim global dominance. This is not how the world works. And the problem is that even in 2022, a large portion of the Chinese population still lives in villages. There's little peasants with no access to proper healthcare, services, education, let alone clean water. I mean, there's absolutely no way you can become a real global superpower when you have 800 million of your people struggling to survive daily. It's not going to happen. Now, the other factor that needs to be considered here is how likely is China to keep the current rate at which its economy has been growing. I mean, the growth was staggering. Now, the main problem with that is that China is slowly becoming extremely aging. The crazy part is that it's mostly self-inflicted. They did this to themselves. So China had this policy in force between 1980 and 2015. It was the one-child policy, basically a law that limited families to only one single kid. Guess what? When you limit families to one kid only, bad shit are going to happen. You know what they say? Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Now, the Chinese government actually repealed this law, but the Chinese people are not even close to reproducing at the same rate. In 1980, the median age of a Chinese citizen was 21 years old. Right now, it is all the way up to 39, my guy. And at this rate, by the time we hit 2050, the median age in China is going to be 50 years old. And while it is true that, US suffers from a very similar aging population problem, the US can automatically add new blood, add new working age residents by immigration. Because everybody wants to move to the US. But ask yourself this question. Is anybody you know trying to immigrate into China? Hardly. And look, things are not getting better for China at this point. As of 2020, the proportion of elderly Chinese that are 65 and older was 9% of the population. This year, 2022, 2 years later, we're at 14%. At this pace, by 2050, 1/3 of the Chinese population is going to be above 65 years old. Even right now, before the feet hit the shan, only 900 million Chinese are at the working age of 16 to 59. There's 40% of China who are not working, who are either too old or too young. And that's a major problem. China has effectively become the Jose Mourinho of demographic problems. They're playing the 4-2-1 system. Now, the 4-2-1 system, for those of you who like soccer or football, depends on where you're from, is a society where most families have a 4-2-1 structure. Essentially, one working couple supports 4 parents and 1 child. That is not sustainable. Now, look, the aging population imbalance increases healthcare expenses, pension costs, at the same time reducing productivity, reducing tax revenues, reducing savings, reducing investments. And all of these negative effects on China's economic growth are not going to go away just because somebody hopes they will. And Ray Dalio can't hope this thing away. On top of that, add the fact that they don't have any rule of law over there. Imprisonment of political rivals, check. CEOs and founders like Jack Ma going to prison or disappearing for slightly criticizing the regulation, check. Lack of any prospect of being energy independent, check. Chinese ghost towns, check. The complete farce that is the Chinese real estate market, check. And just to let you know, the Chinese real estate market is literally the strongest part in their economy. And that whole thing is built on chicken legs. Also, we can talk about their borders, surrounded by unfriendly neighbors, being part of the Putin fan club, and the complete politicization of the economy by President Xi, including vicious crackdowns on successful companies such as Alibaba, Tencent, Didi, just to name a few. Not to mention the refusal of Chinese companies listed in the US to be regulated and audited by US regulators, which led to a major risk of actual delisting from the US stock exchanges. And combine all of these ingredients, you get a nice dish of a country that is in deep shit. Now, as far as the reserve currency goes, look, there are a lot of things not to like about the US dollar. That's for sure. The massive printing of money, check. The massive US national debt, check. The insane inflation, check. The sanctions, everything, sure. China, on the other hand, has around 125 countries which consider China to be its key, biggest, best partner for trading. China, Russia, India, Brazil, they all hate what the US is doing with sanctions. They don't want it. So, if they all don't agree with what the US is doing, if they're all hating on it, if China and all of their friends, Brazil, Russia, India, and all of their 125 partners agreed to use their respective currencies to push the yuan to become the world's reserve currency, would it work? Well, theoretically, the answer is probably yes. So ask yourself this question. If that's so simple, why hasn't it happened yet? Because China likes the US? Not exactly. Despite everything I just told you, the dollar still somehow holds about 60% of the world's reserve currency. Interesting, right? Including the holy grail, which is the petrodollar status. Now, I'm not going to talk about that, but it's a huge element. The only currency OPEC sells oil in is only the US dollars. Why is that? Well, that's because they like the US. No, that's because they cannot change. So why can't OPEC just say, well, we're going to change to yuan? We hate the US. The relationship with MBS and Biden has never been worse. Why can't they just move to the yuan? You need stability to serve as the world's money. For that, you need the rule of law, due process, democratic elections, transparency in politics, transparency in banking, oversight, regulation, all things that China excels in. Obviously, that's a joke. For China to get all of that in place, they would literally need to absolutely abolish the Chinese Communist Party, change the regime, overhaul everything, become democratic. Basically, the Chinese Communist Party has to decide to kill itself to make it the world's reserve currency. And as you know, the Chinese Communist Party isn't really that good at relinquishing control. And the point of this video is quite simple. China is not some global superpower. They're not about to take over. In fact, they're going to struggle to keep the lights on for the next 20 years. They're going to have massive demographic problems, massive energy problems, massive political, geopolitical. They have a lot of problems to solve. Definitely not take over the world. That's the least of their concerns. They want a renegotiated place at the table. That's why they're posturing, but they don't want to manage the shit. They literally can't. Now, obviously, they could in the future if they ever got rid of the CCP and reformed the fuck out of this country, basically make it modern, democratic, and absolutely everything that it is not today. But this is like asking Putin to resign and give up the power and make Russia democratic just because it's the best thing for Russia, despite it means giving up control. Communists are not really good at really giving up control.